Hello, Internet friend. Today on Value Side, preparing for the trade wars. I'm David Ravel. Well, the story is told of my grandfather at San Pedro Harbor in the late 1930s, watching a couple of cargo ships file by with iron and scrap metal headed across the Pacific to Japan. "They're sending Japan the steel to fight against us," said Grandpa. On January 7th, 1941, his vision came true as the Japanese Imperial Air Force attacked Pearl Harbor. Today, those who are as prescient as my grandfather see a similar conflict in our time. Fortunately, it's not a hot war, but an economic war, one that is likely to require our sacrifice, just as World War II required sacrifices from American citizens nearly a century ago. What is apparent is that the price of many of the products and goods that we rely on will have substantially higher costs resulting from increased tariffs. Or, in the most extreme cases, it may not be available at all. Potential shortages should be our primary focus. So let's take an inventory of our home, estimating the items that are most important and likely to run out in a case of supply chain disruption. At the top of my list is the medications that I take daily. It may come as a surprise, but many, perhaps most, of these prescription medicines are actually produced overseas. Now, unfortunately, it's nearly impossible to determine whether or not a particular drug is made in China, for instance. After calling my doctor's office and the pharmacy I used, neither could tell me where my meds are made. However, the University of Minnesota has a wonderful website, cidrap.umn.edu. That's cidrap.umn.edu. It's very helpful. Quote, "We have found that the vast majority of generic drugs and their API, much like brand drugs, come from foreign sources," said Stephen W. Schoenemeyer, the head of CIDRAP. Another valuable resource is pharmacychecker.com. That's pharmacychecker.com. There you'll find a very insightful report, quote, "not made in the USA," unquote, that details just how we got into this state. What's more, on the same page, you can type in your prescription and see where you can purchase that prescription worldwide. Pharmacy Tractor is a useful tool if, for instance, U.S. pharmacies run out of your particular prescription, but say a European provider can send it to you. Although under the current iteration you may incur a 10% tariff, it would be preferable to doing without. Consider purchasing some of your meds beforehand. This same strategy of seeking alternative sources and possibly stockpiling your inventory is happening with many of the country's more savvy corporations. You may have read that Apple Computer leased several cargo planes to fly iPhones from India just before any major increase in tariffs. Let's take a look at China. However, of all the countries subject to increasing American tariffs, China is the chief target. Currently, both President Donald Trump and Chairman Xi Jinping have dug in their heels, refusing to bend to the other's demands. On both sides of the Pacific, tariffs are nearing or exceeding 100%, and there is a very real possibility that trade in specific items could stop. So let's examine those items that China exports to the United States and would be subject to interruption. As noted, pharmaceuticals are a major export item for China. In the last reported year, 2013, China sent $43 billion in meds to the U.S. As substantial as that amount is, it pales in comparison to Chinese electronics sent to America. Again, in 2023, China sent $548 billion in electronics and electronic equipment stateside. And the message is clear. If you need something electronic, order it now while it's still available. Other precision manufactured Chinese products includes machinery, lab and medical equipment, technical devices, photo supplies, specialty vehicles and equipment, and the list goes on and on. It's well worth it to take a moment to determine what you may need over the next 6 months and find out where it's made. My professional friend was having trouble with his iPhone the other day. It's his only phone, and it's vital that he is available around the clock. It makes sense that he is considering purchasing a new iPhone now while it is still readily available. The outlook. For those who have followed Donald Trump for a while, you know that much of what he is doing today is standard operating procedure for the president. He generally leads with the most draconian outcomes, later backing off to a more reasonable position. While Chairman Xi may also utilize a strong initial position and be open to compromise as events progress. If you noticed, Xi has chosen to have others respond to Trump, avoiding any direct person-to-person conflict at this point. This tactic would be consistent with some resolution when Xi steps in personally later as the great compromiser. In any event, there is a better than even chance that what we're seeing now is the hottest phase of this economic conflict, a conflict that hopefully will not last long. If that is the case, then some of the precautions you'd take now would not be necessary in a few months. But if this conflict does drag on for months, your strategy of taking inventory of those items you rely on and finding alternative suppliers for them will prove to be invaluable. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider buying me a cup of coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/David Revell. That's REAVILL. That's buymeacoffee.com/David Revell. Thanks for listening.